Hi, this is our Econ project on determinants of supply and demand and market equilibrium. We'll start with our notes on demand.
Yeah, so we have two definitions. First one is quantity demanded, and that's the amount of product buyers will purchase at a certain price. And then we have the demand schedule right here. It's the table indicating the quantity demanded.
So as you can see by the demand schedule, when you graph it, it'll give you this downward sloping demand curve. You can see this downward sloping demand curve. It has a couple reasons why. The first one is the income effect. The more people buy, the more income that they use. The substitute effect, when the price goes up, the quantity demanded of a substitute goes up. And then diminishing marginal utility is the additional utility gain is decreasing as you get more.
And then over here we have the law of demand, which is the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. And when you look at this graph, that is pictured by the downward sloping line right here.
As you can see in the demand schedule, it shows each different price point and the quantity demanded that would be applied in the market. For our example, we use the market for pencils. Okay, so for our second note slide we have for you guys is determinants of demand. Determinants of demand is basically what factors go into where the demand curve will be on the graph. There's shifts that it can happen. You can have the demand curve shift with less demand, which would be to the left on the graph. So for example, if this line went to here, and then there's a shift where you can have more, where this line can go to here. So depending on these few reasons, we'll explain. The first reason we have is change in the number of consumers. So if a lot of new consumers or a lot of new people come to a town and there's a large demand for apples in that town, it'll increase because there's more consumers.
So second, we have changing consumer taste. So you can think of it as like what's trending at the moment. So let's say apples are really popular, demand will shift up, and same thing if they're not, it'll shift to the left.
Change in income, inferior or normal. So it's probably touched on in another video, inferior and normal goods, but an inferior good is a good that buyers will buy less of when they have more income. So think about it this way, if Braden starts making $500 more, is he gonna buy the nice plates or the paper plates? The paper would be the inferior and the nicer plates would be that normal good. So if Braden's income increases, the demand for the normal good will increase, but for the inferior good, it'll decrease.
All right, so before we have a change in price of substitute goods, so let's say oranges is a substitute for apples and the price of them goes up extremely high. The apples demand will go up since people aren't going to want to buy the oranges. And that's the same thing with if the orange price goes down, demand for apples is going to go down because people will start buying the oranges.
And then kind of the opposite idea for number 5, change in price of complementary goods. So if, let's just say apple juice is a complementary good for apples, if the demand for apples goes, or if the price of apples goes way up, the demand of apple juice will go way down. So the complementary, the graph will do opposites of what happens to the price of it.
So then we have a change in expectations for the economy. So let's say you think the economy is going to start sucking, demand will go down. And if you think the economy is going to be thriving, demand will go up.
And then the last one we have is the change in expectations or the price. This is kind of like, do you think buyers are going to buy it because they think the price is going to increase due to a certain event? That could be due to something in politics or current events, but if they think the price is going to increase a lot, the demand is going to increase a lot right before they think that. So the next slide we have is on supply.
So we have two definitions. We have quantity supplied, and that is the number of goods a producer will output at a price. And then we have the law of supply, which is the curve is upsloping and producers gain more money to sell more, and the law of supply is shown right on this line right here.
So yeah, the supply curve is opposite and crosses through the demand curve at this point right here. So So that point where they cross on the graph is going to be the equilibrium, the point of equilibrium. If you want to revert to the table, it would be where the quantity demand and the quantity supplied are equal. The supply curve is upsloping on the graph, and that's due because the more money that each firm, or the more output that each firm could put out, the more price increases. All right, so the next slide we have is determinants of supply. Similar to the demand curve, the supply shift can increase or decrease. So if the supply crease is increasing and gaining, it's going to be moving towards the right in this direction and could become that. Think of this as the first supply curve and this is the second. That would be an increase, but if it's decreasing, it's going to go the opposite direction, and this could be your second supply curve over there. So if it's increasing, it's moving to the right. If it's decreasing, it's moving to the left. There's a couple different ways that this can happen, and the first way is change in number of supplies. So for our example, we're using the market for pencils. If suddenly the wood that they used for pencils decreased in value, or there was less wood, they would be able to make less pencils. So the supply for pencils would shift to the left in that case. And similarly, if there was a lot more trees, they would make more pencils.
And for the second one, we have change in input prices. So let's say the input prices to make a pencil drop $1. You'll be able to make more pencils, so that would shift the supply curve to the right, and vice versa. If the prices went up, you'd be able to make less, so it would shift up and to the left.
The next one is change in subsidy or taxes. You'll probably be learning about subsidy or taxes from a different group, but for the gist of it, a subsidy is when the government gives money to a firm to produce something. So if the government thought that society needed more pencils and they wanted to pay me extra money for each pencil I output, I would start making more, and the supply curve would shift to the right.
And the last one we have is technology. Now, this is very straightforward and vague, but once technology improves, then that would just increase the supply of, in this case, pencils.
So all that stuff plays into what it means to be in market equilibrium. So the market equilibrium is that point where quantity supplied is quantity demand. Basically, this is the point where if a company is willing to sell a certain amount of product, that's what the buyers are willing to purchase. This point can move, like we said, the demand and supply curve can move. So similar, if this demand curve moves up, it's going to have this new point of equilibrium higher up on the graph. Same thing applies with supply depending on the shifts. If we shift this supply curve to here, it's going to have a newer, higher point.
And we have the question answers down here. For number 1, we have C as in catastrophic, B as in basketball, C for 3 as in COVID, E for 4 as in elephant, and then C for 5 as in car.